What happened here is somebody was working very close to the edge. They went through their workpiece into this aluminum band, and that can reflect back and cause damage to the laser. Now, if you've got any unusable pieces, feel free to rotate it around, install it whichever direction you want, that doesn't matter. So this table just slips into place.
Are those are replaceable to the point where if they get bad enough, we're going to replace them?
Yes, but they are also several $100s.
Awesome. All right.
Yes, I think they're in the high several $100s, in fact.
And that section is literally unusable, or it
this
just
section
won't provide a lot of support?
No, it just won't provide a lot of support, but if you get too much damage, you start losing your level.
Oh, okay,
and
sure.
then you don't get repeatable focus. Yeah. And actually, there was a great example in Menlo Park. We lost about that much of one of the tables. Somebody had overheated their workpiece, and all of these weld or crimp points got separated, and we had a nice spaghetti going across instead of the interlocked honeycomb. So this whole section of the table, I mean, you look at it, it deforms. So in that point, we did have pretty much this entire quadrant completely unusable. We had to spend $800 or whatever it was to replace it. So please do take care of the equipment whenever possible. All right, so we set the table in place. Now we need to lock it in.
Just one simple question.
Yes.
Why is it? Why do they have a honeycomb design? Why don't they have something more?
This is so you can do cutting data as well as etching data. The metal table provides good support. You don't want something that's going to scorch or char, so you don't want wood. But you don't want to be cutting on solid metal because it can actually reflect back into the lens and cause damage. So the honeycomb has enough stiffness to be structural, but enough airspace that it's safe for the laser. So once you've set it in place, just drop these 3 rulers down. This is very important, because if the rulers are left up, there can actually be a collision between the optics head and the rulers, and that can throw out the calibration. Alright, so there's our pre-check. Let's talk a little bit about how the laser works. The laser beam is generated around the back of the machine here. Am I unlocked? No, I'm not unlocked. And we'll go through that later in class too. So we've got a beam generated around the back of the machine, bounces off a stationary 45-degree mirror. There's a second 45-degree mirror that travels with the gantry, which is our y-axis. Third mirror up here on the optics head, which is our x-axis. And finally, the beam passes down through the lens, which you'll see today as a horizontal yellow disc. Now, as the beam is traveling around the longest part of its path, it's about 1/4 inch in diameter. When it passes down through the lens, it takes approximately 2 inches to focus down to 3 to 5/1000ths of an inch diameter, and then flares out again, basically forming an hourglass shape. When we're talking about setting focus, we are aligning a particular portion of our workpiece, usually the top surface, with the center of that hourglass, our tightest focus point. But before we even think about setting our focus, we want to make sure we're getting a focus all the way down to 3 to 5/1000ths, which means we need to check to make sure the lens is clean. So we're going to cycle around so you can all see this after I've talked over what we're looking for. Could you hand me that class roster? Thank you. So you've got 2 tools to check the lens cleanliness. Just slide a piece of white paper underneath, and you're going to be looking down through the yellow lens to check visually for specks, smudges, fingerprints, anything that might block the path of the lens. Your second tool is this pointer here. This is just a standard red LED pointer. It follows the same path as the cutting laser. And what you're looking at is the interaction between the pointer and the surface of the lens itself. Ideally, that pointer should be invisible or almost invisible. You may see just a slight sparkle of diffraction as it goes down through the lens. If you see a solid, round red dot bouncing off the surface of the lens, that's the pointer bouncing off debris that was built up on the lens, and that is definitely a sign it needs to be cleaned. And I actually screwed up. I just cleaned the lens right before class, so this one's looking pretty darn good.
So you shouldn't, when you're looking from there, you shouldn't see it on this section.
Much at all. No. You will always see it on the paper, so don't worry about that. I'm going to do a comparison with this laser once we get it up and going. Because I expect this one is going to be dirty after having just had a full session. And yeah, this one's pretty dirty. You can see this has got a lot of stuff built up on it, and the pointer is a lot more visible than I like. You can compare it to number 2 there, which has just been cleaned.
If I see something on the
Yeah, if you see something on the yellow lens, it's a problem.
Oh yeah.
You'll also want to check on the underside of this last mirror for specks and smudges and such. Yeah, don't worry about that. It does this sometimes. Big difference, eh?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
When did we open this? It was last May?
Yeah, something like that. Like
Yeah.
about a year, 'cause I got rid of the Yeah.
About a year then.
So why is it again there? Because the debris has come up on that lens, or?
That one I'm calling very dirty because if you look,
I saw it. I saw the red and the yellow.
yeah, the red and the yellow, and also there's some kind of smudges over towards the front of the lens, almost like somebody had water on the surface of the lens and dust pulled off to the side. So you can
That
actually
beam is
see
coming
some
here,
grit.
it's hitting there, and it's going down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when they work that, whatever they work messed up.
Yeah. So this just needs to be cleaned. It's not that big a deal, but it is something the staff will do for you. The reason for that is we experimented with having members clean the lens. It turns out some members are great at it, others are not. People were using inappropriate chemicals, using excessive force, damage was done. Now the staff get to clean the lens again. But it's very important to keep your lenses clean, so I'd recommend bug the staff as many times as you feel like to make sure your lens is clean. Definitely, at the beginning of your session, get them to clean it for you. Then you get to a reliable, consistent start. And then if you end up generating a lot of smoke or other debris during your session, you may need to get the staff to re-clean the lens for you as often as every 20 minutes. Or you may be able to go through several sessions and have no problems whatsoever. Just depends on what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about the effects of a dirty lens. It will affect the quality of your work, and if the lens gets dirty enough, it will damage the equipment. So we have etching data and cutting data that we can use on this laser. As the lens gets dirtier, your etching data is going to become muddier, it's going to lack detail, you're going to see more soot built up on the surface if you're working with wood-based products. You may see inconsistent melting patterns on acrylic, just all sorts of bad things. And the dirtier your lens is, the worse those effects are going to become. For your cutting data, as the lens gets dirtier, your cutting curve is going to become wider, and your penetration power is going to be reduced. And that sometimes is a huge difference, even from debris that you can't even see on the lens. So if you're seeing reduced quality, even if the lens looks perfect, get the staff to clean it for you. It might make a difference. Now, if the lens gets dirty enough, basically the more stuff you have on the lens, the more heat is generated and held within that lens, and eventually it will deform or even shatter. And we have had that happen here. In fact, it happened the first week we were open on laser number 3. That lens has, yes, been replaced a long time ago. I came in one day and the entire optics housing here was just covered in black soot. It took me about 20 minutes to uncover the lens. Not the entire housing, just the lens. And when I did, there was a large rainbow-colored watermark type effect in the center. Yes, we definitely saw a reduced quality from that, and that lens shattered about 2 or 3 weeks later. Enough for any of that. Any questions on this already? Okay. So that is our basic pre-setup. Check the fire hazard underneath, check the lens clarity. Now we're ready to install a workpiece. And now, I'm going to be using 2 pieces of cardboard. First one is the one I actually want to be working on. The second is my sacrificial. I'm trying to encourage everybody to use the sacrificial layer whenever you're using cutting data. Whenever you're cutting your workpiece, you're of course going all the way through. That means you're delivering surplus heat either to the vector grid itself, which gradually wears it down, or maybe to some affordable sacrificials we don't have to worry about. Please protect the equipment. Alright, so I'm going to install the workpiece itself and the sacrificial. Set my focus, I'm going to pop the focus gauge onto these 2 pegs here, and then hit the focus button to go into focus mode. Once I'm in focus mode, these up and down arrows are engaged, and I'm just going to raise up the work bed, the optics head stays stationary, until the tip of the focus gauge is just coming into contact with my workpiece. You've got 2 cues here at the right spot. Visually, you will start to see this focus gauge move forward and up. But you want to catch the very, very first movement, and that can be a very subtle cue, particularly late at night. So I tend to recommend the tactile method. Cheap feeler gauge, just wiggle a piece of paper until you feel resistance, then you're at the right spot. You can hold the up button down until you're close, but you will want individual button presses at the end to really dial that in. So I can still move the paper, but I'm feeling a little resistance. That's perfect. Next, pop off the focus gauge. You don't want to be going back to the corner and run this into the ruler. And finally, exit focus mode, using the completely non-intuitive reset button. That causes more confusion than any button on the laser. All that reset does is it re-engages the motors and goes back to the home position.
What is